So we wanted to start this off with a little explanation of reincarnation from the Buddhist perspective.
Yeah, actually, I figured rather than just like a jumping into debate, we should probably first figure out what it is that we're talking about. And you actually know better than I do. I haven't spent a lot of time on reincarnation. I've always had what I think are some simple arguments, not necessarily to show that it's false, but that it's arbitrary. The first question that actually came to mind right before we started was, maybe you could start with, where do all the souls come from? And I understand that the Buddhist conception of the soul is either absent, and there's something that fits that space. So as you can tell, I don't know.
Right.
The lineage of samskaras, the continuity of consciousness, whatever it is that is continuing throughout a lineage of lives. There's what 7 billion people alive today.
Yes.
So I know that Hare Krishnas, which when I've talked to them about it, they're probably the only ones I've ever debated on it. Thing is they have a kind of a silly conception that you start with lower forms of like animals and work your way up, which to me is kind of crazy, because how many ants are there in the world? And by their conception, you're an ant once, and then you graduate from anthood up to something else. So if there's like however many trillions and trillions and trillions of ants alive right now,
Yeah.
then there should be an equal number on the next level up.
Right. It makes no sense because there's exponentially, astronomically more, animal species, and
Yeah. So what's
they're all
filtering out
dying
the
constantly.
souls? Do the souls converge? Are you made up of a trillion ant souls to make a human soul?
Yeah, right.
And what I get from them is, well, there's these other planes of existence, so which is just hand waving, right?
Yeah.
So the lineage isn't just on Earth. It goes all over the place throughout
That's
other
what Buddhism
dimensions.
says too. Yeah. It says
Really?
it's not planet centric. It is only in the sense that karma tends to keep certain souls. Okay, I just used souls from a Buddhist perspective.
Yeah.
It's never used. I've heard one Buddhist monk say the soul is a perfectly good word. You can use it as long as you don't let it confuse you. And it's the same with the self, right? And in a conventional sense, we're all like selves exist.
Yeah.
Right. But that's just describing what is. And it causes confusion if you take it to be something concrete, something enduring, lasting, permanent.
So can you distinguish the proper use of the word soul? And I get that that they would say you're kind of using it as a tool in a similar sense that you would be using I and self when also knowing that that's a fiction.
Exactly.
In a sense.
Yeah.
Now, there being no self and there being no soul, these still aren't the same thing to them, right?
It is. It's actually, yeah.
Okay.
The word atta or atman, it means self. It also very much means soul. So when they say anatta, no self, no soul, it's literally the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you familiar at all with Advaita Vedanta?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That I haven't looked a lot into it, but that's much more closer to my view
Okay.
on things. I don't know why I didn't think about saying that earlier, but tell me how, from the Buddhist conception, in contrast to what seems rather silly from what I get from the Hare Krishnas,
Right.
where we've got 7 something billion souls,
Right.
and those lineages are traced backwards, is there, how far do they go? Are they infinitely long prehistories? Where do the samskaras start? Do they start with just a single samskara that pops out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and then it's built on? And
Let's clarify the word samskara too, because that's actually not from the tradition, from the Theravada tradition of Buddhism that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
There is the word sankara, and I've been using them as synonyms, but it takes on a different meaning.
samskara?
Yeah.
Yeah, that I've got from Hare Krishnas. I hope I'm saying it correctly.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
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 What does it mean though?
Well, I would be the wrong person to ask, but basically, I just know that that's the right word to use to talk about whatever it is that that is that space of things that continue, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
From life to life.
Yeah.
Right. So I can't tell you how samskaras break down, the nature of them.
Yeah.
That's actually often my question. Is when you take out everything that is not the self,
Yeah.
that is like there seem to be like arbitrarily true facts about a soul, and what's essential that's left when you take out the arbitrary parts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The facts of the history of some soul that are particular to that soul, idiosyncratic. When you take all of those out, what are the inherent properties of a soul?
See, this is where Buddhism is really, really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because there's whole stories, I don't know if I said this, but of like basically a simile used of a king who hears someone playing music, right? And they want to find the source of that music. So they take the performer's guitar, and then they take the strings off, and then they decompose the guitar, and they break it down, and he opens it up and doesn't find the music, and then he burns it and sifts through the ashes and still doesn't find the music, right? And it's the same concept with of a self or a being, right? If you're looking for the soul, the essence of it, you're not going to find it because there isn't any.
Okay.
So how can there be reincarnation?
Yeah. So if there's nothing left, pardon me, then it seems that there would be nothing left to continue.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So I'll give you the explanation.
Yeah.
Basically, what it says is that the process of being is a bunch of parts, which are called khandhas, right? And it's this collection of parts. So you've got form, physical form. In order for like to be being, you need form.
Yeah.
You need.
In my view, there's no such thing as non-form. There's just form.
But let's go through it, right?
Yeah.
See, because they actually distinguish between mental factors and material form and things, right? So it's material form. Feeling is an element of being, right? And feelings break down into the categories of pleasant, painful, and neutral, right? So when there's a being, you're going to have a form. You're going to have pleasant, painful, neutral feelings. There's the next one up is perception. So that's the way that we perceive things. It's an instantaneous process where we overlay. It's almost like naming, right? We look at a cup and it's a cup, right? But it's a cup the second we look at it, even though ultimately, what is a cup, right? A cup is just a process. A cup is glass that is actually a very, very slow moving liquid, which will eventually smash and whatever, be recycled. So, and then those are your perceptions. And then the next one is called volition or mental formations. So that is everything that we do that's habitual, our personality all fits into this category. And then the last one is consciousness. And so when you, in order, like a being has all of these things. It has these 5 what are called khandhas, which means groups, basically aggregates. Mm-hmm. And the process of being the process of being is rooted in like it happens because of ignorance, right? So and I just want to address what you said about or your question about where do they come from, right? Mm-hmm. They say that there's no beginning, and I don't know how this makes sense, but they say that beings have always existed, each individual being. So it's pluralistic, right? You've got individual beings that are doing this, and they do this. They wander on endlessly because of ignorance, and because of ignorance, they crave to continue to exist. They crave to experience feeling, pleasant feeling, right? That's why this process of being, the coming together of these five aggregates continues.
Do you mind if I ask a question then?
Yeah.
Because that is one of the only so many ways to conceive it, and I've thought of this before. If it goes back infinitely into the past, then nirvana should have been reached an infinite amount of time ago. It cannot take an infinite number of actions to reach a finite goal. If it takes an infinite number of actions to reach nirvana, then you will never reach nirvana, right? If you have an infinite amount of time to accomplish it, then you should have accomplished it an infinite amount of time ago.
Yeah. Interestingly, so I'm not entirely sure I understand your argument, but I actually had a problem with the idea of an infinite past because I don't understand how an individual being could have an infinite past. That means they've done an infinite amount of things. How can you have done an infinite amount of things? Like if it's the past, if it's already happened, then there must be a finite amount of things that you've done. I don't see how because if it's infinite, that means it continues on forever.
It means there's nothing.
It means it's not finished. Yeah. How could it be? If it's already been done, if it is the past, if it is finished, how can it be infinite? It can't be finished if it's infinite.
For all logically doable actions on the part of an infinite being, they would all have to have necessarily been finished an infinite amount of time ago, right? If there's whatever's possibly doable for you, you've done an infinite amount of time ago because you've had an infinite amount of time to do it. So there shouldn't be any next event for you. You've already done it. You finished that an infinite amount of time ago. You already got around to that an infinite amount of time ago.
What they say, though, is that is true about everything except nirvana, and there is also no guarantee that any being will ever reach nirvana. It's the rarest thing. It's the rarest thing that a being can do. Is no guarantee. It's actually highly unlikely.
Well, there's a guarantee that they won't if they haven't yet, if they've been given an infinite amount of time and failed to. If after an infinite amount of time you fail to do something, that means given an infinite amount of time, you will fail to do it, which means you won't do it, right? So that is a guarantee that you won't do it.
I don't see how that could be, because you should be
done by now.
But you're not, and there's no guarantee that you ever will. But the idea is that there is the possibility. So
it's a true statement to say that given an infinite amount of time, you've failed to reach nirvana. So if something, given an infinite amount of time, fails to do something, then for all eternity, it will fail to do that.
I think I see what you're saying, but we're extending this infinity of time into the past, which for me doesn't make sense. I can't wrap my mind around that, because the fact is that despite having an infinite past, you still have a present and future. So that means there is still opportunity to do the thing called nirvana.
Yeah, well, this is the thing with it's incoherent in my view.
Well, me too. I don't get it.
To have persons with infinite histories.
Right. I don't understand that.
Because in order to be conscious, there has to be something that you're not yet conscious of. something that you haven't yet done. There has to be some way of having a next moment that you haven't already had, right? So,
I don't.
consciousness needs to begin somewhere with either none or some limited amount of knowledge. That knowledge and experience grows by becoming conscious of things it was not yet conscious of, right? So you could have a finite past and an infinite end is one possibility. I'm actually not sure that consciousness, in terms of there being a conscious being, makes sense in that way either. But consciousness, in my view, and I've never been able to think my way out of this, requires a limited amount of knowledge. And when I say knowledge, I mean in an absolute sense, like all forms of knowledge, like knowing you're experiencing, being aware of, even your knowledge and experience of things that may be false. For you to have a next moment, you can't have already had that moment.
Well, what about the fact that if reincarnation is true and this infinite stream of past lives is true, then your knowledge goes away every time you die. So you never reach that full extent of knowledge, that full extent of experiences, because you get this amnesia, this forgetting every time you have to die and get born again. And in fact, like, that's probably the point of that, is because you have this craving, this desire to continue to exist. So the only way that is possible is if you continuously die and forget.
Yeah. Like Michael Keeling sitting here, if I forgot everything Michael Keeling, then there's no Michael Keeling part left, right? So some things that I have may go on to someone else who lives a life, has their own personality form, their own experiences, their own memories that they will later forget, but that person didn't bring any of the Michael Keeling part with them. They just got the non-Michael Keeling part of me, right? So like I was saying before, the person who inherited Hitler's soul is not Hitler. Hitler was Hitler. And the person who inherited Hitler's karma doesn't deserve that karma, because they didn't do anything to earn that karma. Hitler did, right? But that's on the assumption that there's this thing, this box that to me appears to be empty, of what continues from one person to the next, that necessarily ties two people together. And when I say people here, I mean personalities. So the personality of Michael Keeling is not the personality of the person I'm reincarnated into, or maybe it is. Maybe somebody's born who has my personality in the same way, which would mean somehow, or like some core of my personality, and then that core gets shaped by different experiences or whatever. But that means that there's some some underlying code inherent to me that gets passed on.
They call it karma. Karma is what gets passed on. And also, it's a continuous, I've tried to explain this before, but it's not a new being. So each individual being is an individual. It's a plurality, right? So you, Michael Keeling, are a being. You don't end, according to this, you don't end when your body dies. You're, as a being, simply continue. Consciousness doesn't even cease. Consciousness just goes on. Its memories are wiped out. It's the same being.
Well, what is different, though, from saying, let's say I make up an alternative form of reincarnation, omnicarnation, let's call it, and where when I die, I'm reincarnated into being you. And there's nothing stopping my next incarnation from existing parallel to my current one, right? I don't see any reason why it couldn't work that way, right? Like there's you have to tie the history of this consciousness, this continuity of consciousness, to the history of universe in reincarnation, in a way that my omni-incarnation doesn't require.
Yeah.
Like two of my incarnations can exist simultaneously, and when this one dies, it begins at the beginning of your life, and I don't see a contradiction there. But with the Buddhists,
Yeah. Yeah.
How?
And as I said before we began this, I don't believe this. I don't believe in reincarnation.
Yeah, I'm not asking.
But
tell me your view if you have
absolutely.
something to say on it. But I'm asking, like, what would they say?
Yeah, the way I explained it before is that all the beings that exist right now are individuals. Like, you cannot merge them. You cannot create two out of one. They are individuals, individual beings. It's like a river. Yeah. And
is there an argument for that being true, or are those just arbitrary assumptions?
Well, that's an interesting question.
How do they arrive at that claim?
That's an interesting question. Okay, this is where you get into the claim that they make, that this stuff is actually, you can't really hammer it out by logic. The way that you come to know this is through meditation and direct experience of the nature of being through direct observation. And that's their claim to. They also say that the Buddha and the others that awaken by following the path which he described, that they know this stuff about how the process of being works. You know, what the causes of being are, and what each individual being is capable of.
So they know that you can't reincarnate into a body that exists simultaneous with another incarnation. They just know this to be true, and then we have to accept that and hope that with thousands of hours of meditation we're somehow going to come to know how that's true, but we'll never be able to explain it.
Explain what you mean by that. I'm not quite sure. So they enter a body that's already existing with a conscious being.
Yeah, like my next incarnation being the one in front of me. So I'm your birth starts at the end of my death. I don't see a contradiction there.
My birth starts at the end of your death, and because I don't quite explain again.
Well, what the karma that you inherited, how do you know that you didn't inherit it from me?
Right. Okay. So the way they're thinking about it is that one individual like you, like when someone is reborn into a new body, it's the same individual. It's the same person.
Yeah.
So it's you. It could never be somebody else.
Yep.
That's it. That's
it. And so let's say you were born the moment I die. So you don't exist yet. Somebody like you exists in front of me, but then the you that you are right now in this hypothetical will be born when I die, right? And will come out to be you. Now I don't see a contradiction in that being true of the you that is actually in front of me right now. That later on, from my stream of consciousness, ends and begins with the beginning of yours when you were born, right? I don't see a reason why it will still be true that the part of me that continues, that continued from some other life to this one and on to another one, can't have moved on to the body that's in front of me right now, and I'm looking at myself right now.
Oh, so but you're talking about some weird like non-linearity of time, like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
die and go back and become me at my birth.
Well, not go back.
Yeah.
It's not back in terms of the stream of my consciousness. I haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah.
I haven't had the conscious experience that's happening in front of me yet, but I will.
Okay.
You have had my experience,
Yeah.
right? Because you inherited mine. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case.
I don't have an argument for why it wouldn't either, but the Buddhists would say it's not possible because each individual is an individual,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're a continuous process. So when you die, you continue, and when I
Yeah.
die, I continue. You will never be me from a Buddhist perspective.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I'm not yet you.
No, but you will
And
never
you're
be
no
me.
longer me.
You understand what I'm saying? The Buddhists will say that you could never experience my experience. You could never. It's pluralistic. We are individuals, and we always
but
will be.
You have experienced. So there's two hypotheticals here. One where you're born linearly in time after I am, and that you.
No, it wouldn't be me. It'd be you. Like, I don't see why you don't, like, you're not acknowledging, like, the way they see it is that
then
it's one individual.
The
being
person
you.
that I was prior to this life, am I that person?
Yes.
Okay, so
You're that process, because it's not a thing, right?
Yeah,
We talked about that.
So I can have that person's experience. That person can have my experience because we're a single individual.
No, because that event is in the past and has finished. But think of yourself as a single river, right?
Yeah.
A river is not the
I get
same
it.
from.
I just don't understand why it has to be tied to the river of time exterior to my stream of consciousness.
The river of time?
That person, let's say that in my previous life I was Thomas.
Yeah.
Thomas is capable of having Michael Keeling's experience in his next life.
From a Buddhist perspective, the past doesn't exist and the future don't exist.
Yeah, I know. But Thomas can say that in my next life, I will have experiences of recording this podcast under the name of Michael Keeling, and he would be correct in saying that.
Well, think of it this way. A river would be correct in saying, in a month's time, my bank will be 3 meters to the left of where it is now.
Yeah.
And I'll have completely different water molecules in me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is true that Thomas can have Michael Keeling's experience eventually after he's forgotten the Thomas experiences and goes on to the next life.
No, because Thomas is gone. There is
okay.
Thomas was an event, was a river in a certain point in time.
I get it. Thomas is gone. Michael started.
Yeah.
Now, Michael is not Thomas.
Exactly. Well, Michael is the same river, but
I agree with that.
There you go.
And so how are you not the same river? How are we not a single ocean? All souls, how are we not one single ocean? Why are we all rivers? How are we not one ocean of souls? And when you remove all the qualities that are Michael, so that you get to that same thing that Thomas, if you removed all the Thomas parts, you would have a singular identity, right? So you'd have one thing. When you remove all the Michael parts, you have that one thing. When you remove all the Thomas parts, you have that one thing that is a singular thing, right? But only in the case of Thomas and Michael, but not Michael and Kellan.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So why not in the case of Michael and Kellan? When I remove all of the Michael parts and you remove all the Kellan parts, how is that thing left over in your case not identical to the thing left over in my case?
Well, maybe it is. One of the things, one of the descriptions of attaining nirvana, there's the question: how do you save a droplet of water forever? Toss it in the ocean. So it's the idea that maybe nirvana is like entering that ocean. But the
Yeah.
reason why we continue to be individual rivers, according to Buddha, is because of ignorance and clinging to being and craving for sense pleasure.
Yeah. Now, it seems that all of everything else that I've heard said from the Buddha would make sense without the reincarnation part. You don't inherit your karma, but you do build karma. You don't start as a blank slate. You start with the DNA you were given, with the body that forms, and the nature, nurture, epigenetics, and so on, and everything else remains true of what the Buddha said, except for this, what to me seems arbitrary connecting souls in a linear fashion, as if they're all, especially if they're infinite streams from where, right?
Right.
If it's one ocean, then there's all logically possible souls that exist necessarily as possible, possibly experienceable experiences that God can have. And if an omniscience exists, then there is something that it is like to be that being. And an omniscience necessarily knows what it is like to be you, necessarily knows what it is like to be me. And there can never be a time at which that omniscience does not know what it's like to be you, down to its infinitesimally smallest detail. I don't see any the difference between the experience that God knows of being Kellan. There's no quality that I can that itself has properties that would make that experience of being Kellan in the mind of an omniscience that's never failed to exist, because it must exist necessarily for all times that the omniscience exists. That Kellan is numerically identical to the Kellan in front of me. There cannot be a difference. If there's a difference, then that means that there is something that it is like to be Kellan that's possibly knowable, but omniscience cannot know it, right? And there's a sense in which an omniscience cannot know the experience of being anything, because the experience of being Kellan includes the experience of not knowing certain things. But that's the nature of consciousness. The only way that God can have an experience is by forming bubbles of ignorance, right? Within all possibly knowable knowledge are pockets of knowledge that are limited and thus can grow in knowledge, right? So the mind of an omniscience includes all these bubbling consciousnesses. It includes all logically possible consciousnesses. There cannot be one that's possibly knowable that an omniscience doesn't know, right? So and they're metaphysically indiscernible. The pocket of consciousness that is part of the mind of the omniscience and the thing itself.